The shouting could be heard from the street. "This is my house now. Get out, both of you." The man's voice was sharp, impatient, already tired of repeating himself. He stood in the doorway with one hand pressed flat against the frame, blocking the exit, as if it were a border he owned. Inside, the living room smelled of cold coffee and salt from the sea, drifting through the open balcony doors. The woman on the sofa was crying silently, her face turned away, shoulders shaking. The man beside her stood stiff, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He did not shout back, he did not argue. He only stared at the floor, as if the wooden boards might tell him what to do. "Dad, you heard me," the voice continued. "You don't live here anymore." A suitcase lay open near the wall, half filled with clothes that had been folded carefully and then unfolded again. A framed photograph of a young couple on a beach leaned against it, the glass cracked along one corner. The front door opened behind them. The sound was not loud, just the click of a lock and the slow creak of hinges, but it was enough. The shouting stopped. The man in the doorway turned his head first, then his body. The woman on the sofa looked up, wiping her face with the back of her hand. She stood there with her keys still in her fingers, a travel bag hanging from her shoulder, sand clinging to the hem of her coat. Her eyes moved across the room without hurry, taking in the suitcase, the unfamiliar shoes by the door, the tense way her father stood as if bracing for impact. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence felt heavier than the shouting had been. She took a step inside and closed the door behind her. The sound echoed softly through the room. "What's going on here?" she asked. No one answered immediately. The man who had been shouting straightened his back, trying to recover the authority he had lost in that single quiet moment. He glanced at her, then away, as if measuring how much she already understood. Her mother stood up slowly, tears streaking her face. "We were just sorting things out," she said, her voice unsteady. Her daughter's gaze shifted to the suitcase. "It looks like you were being sorted out." That house had never been meant to feel like this. When she bought it, she had imagined laughter, long dinners on the terrace, her parents waking up to the sound of waves instead of traffic. She had imagined relief, rest, gratitude. She had not imagined being greeted by shouting and packed bags. The memory of signing the papers came back to her then, the long flight, the exhaustion, the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had finally done something big enough to matter. She had transferred the money without hesitation, telling herself that family didn't keep score. She had told her sister first. They had spoken late at night, her sister's voice warm, full of congratulations. "They deserve it," she had said. "You're doing the right thing." Now her sister was standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching silently. The man in the doorway cleared his throat. "You should have called before coming. This isn't a good time." She looked at him then, really looked. "You're telling my parents to leave a house I paid for?" she said. Her voice was calm, almost flat. "And you think the problem is my timing?" Her father finally lifted his head. His eyes were red, not just from crying, but from holding something back for too long. "We didn't want to bother you," he said quietly. "They said it was temporary." She nodded once, slowly. Temporary was a word she had learned to distrust. The man laughed under his breath. "Look, let's not make this dramatic. We live here now. It just makes sense." "Sense for whom?" she asked. "For the family," he replied quickly. The word hung in the air, heavy and misplaced. She set her bag down carefully by the door. Outside, the sea kept moving, indifferent to raised voices and broken agreements. Inside, something that had taken years to build was already beginning to crack. She took another step forward. "Then let's talk," she said.
They moved to the dining table, though no one sat down. Papers were spread across its surface, printed emails, a copy of a property deed, handwritten notes in the margin. None of it had been there the last time she visited. Her sister finally spoke. "You're overreacting. We didn't throw them out. We just needed space." Her mother's hands trembled as she reached for a chair. "They said we could stay with Aunt Lena for a while," she said, as if explaining something reasonable, "just until things settled." "Things," her daughter repeated quietly. The husband leaned back against the counter. "You don't live here. You don't see what it's like. The house was empty most of the year. It was a waste." "It wasn't empty," she replied. "They were here. This was theirs to live in." "Legally?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "That's debatable." Her sister shot him a warning look, but it came too late. "What do you mean, debatable?" she asked. He shrugged. "You put the house in Dad's name. Dad gave us permission to stay. We invested money, renovations, furniture. You can't just walk in and claim it back." Her father flinched. "That's not what happened," he said. "You told me it was just for the summer." "And summer ended," the man replied. "People adapt." The room grew louder. Voices overlapped. Accusations surfaced that had nothing to do with the house and everything to do with old resentments. Who had helped more? Who had left first? Who sent money and who sent excuses? She listened without interrupting, watching how easily the story shifted depending on who was speaking. Then her sister turned to her. "You always do this," she said. "You show up with money and think it gives you control." The words landed harder than shouting would have. "I didn't buy control," she said. "I bought them peace." "Well, peace doesn't pay bills," her sister replied. "You don't know what it's like raising kids here." The husband nodded. "Exactly. You live your life somewhere else and drop in when it suits you." Her mother suddenly cried out, "Stop, please, this is tearing us apart." No one listened. A knock sounded at the door. It was sharp, impatient, the kind of knock that didn't ask permission. The husband froze. "Did you call someone?" She shook her head slowly. Her father looked confused. "I didn't." The knock came again, louder. A neighbor's voice drifted in from outside, followed by another, curious, concerned. The husband swore under his breath and opened the door. Two neighbors stood there, one holding a phone. "We heard shouting," the woman said. "Is everything all right?" Before anyone could answer, a uniformed officer stepped into view behind them. "We received a call about a disturbance," he said calmly. "Who lives here?" Everyone spoke at once. The officer raised a hand, one at a time. She stepped forward and handed him a folder she had picked up from the table. "I bought this house," she said. "My parents were forced out today." The officer glanced at the papers, then at the man and her sister. "Is that accurate?" The husband crossed his arms. "This is a family matter." "Family matters can still be civil disputes," the officer replied. "And right now, someone is packing bags." The neighbors watched in silence. Her sister's face tightened. "You called the police on us?" she hissed. "I walked into this," she answered. "You made it public." The officer asked for identification, asked questions, took notes. Each answer stripped away another layer of the story her sister and her husband had been telling. Her father sat down heavily, as if the weight of the day had finally caught up to him. The truth was no longer loud. It was methodical, and it was not on their side. The officer asked them to separate, not physically far, just enough that they could no longer lean on each other's words. Her sister stood by the window, jaw clenched, staring out at the water as if it might take her side. Her husband paced near the kitchen, rubbing his forehead, already rehearsing explanations that sounded reasonable only to himself. Her parents sat together now. Her mother held her father's hand, gripping it the way she had years ago in hospitals and offices where decisions were made without them. The officer reviewed the documents again, the deed, the transfer records, dates, names. He asked careful questions, each one narrowing the space her sister and her husband had been hiding in. "You said you invested money," the officer said, looking at the husband. "Do you have receipts, contracts?" "We planned to. It was an understanding." "An understanding isn't ownership," the officer said. Her sister turned sharply. "So what, we're just supposed to leave?" "For tonight," the officer said. "Yes." Her mother gasped softly. "No, no, they have children." Her daughter looked at her. "Mom," she said quietly, "stop."
The word was not loud, but it carried weight. It was the first time she had ever interrupted her mother like that. Her sister's eyes flashed. "You enjoy this," she said, standing there like a judge. "I hate this," she answered, "but you didn't give me a choice." The officer explained the next steps: temporary arrangements, civil court if they wanted to contest anything. The neighbors slowly drifted away, interest fading now that the shouting had stopped. The husband slammed a cabinet door. "You think this makes you the hero?" he said. "You just destroyed this family." She looked at him steadily. "You did that when you pointed at my father and told him to get out." Silence followed, thick, unavoidable. They packed quickly, angry movements, drawers opened and closed too hard. Her sister didn't look at their parents once. The children stayed quiet, sensing something final in the air. When they reached the door, her sister finally turned back. "I hope it was worth it," she said. Her daughter didn't answer. After they left, the house felt larger, too large. The sea outside was louder now, filling the space the shouting had occupied. Her father stood and walked slowly to the balcony. He rested his hands on the railing and stared at the horizon. "I should have stopped this earlier," he said. "I thought keeping peace meant staying quiet." She joined him. "They counted on that," she said. Her mother began to cry again, softer this time, not from shock, but from understanding. That night, no one slept much. They sat together at the table long after the officer left, talking in fragments, remembering things they had avoided for years, admitting fears that had grown in silence. By morning, the house looked the same light on the floor, the same smell of salt and coffee. But something was gone, and something else had taken its place. In the weeks that followed, the house stayed quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet, in the way places become after something breaks and no one is sure what sound is allowed anymore. Her parents settled into a careful routine, as if afraid that moving too confidently might invite trouble back in. Doors were closed gently, voices stayed low. Her sister did not call. Messages went unread. A lawyer's letter arrived instead, formal and restrained, outlining claims that felt thin even on paper. There was no apology in it, no acknowledgement of that afternoon, only language about entitlement and contribution and misunderstanding. She answered once, through her own attorney. After that, she stopped checking. The court process dragged on, slow and draining. It did not bring relief, only confirmation. The house was never legally theirs. The renovations were voluntary. The permission had been conditional and abused. The ruling came quietly, without drama, without satisfaction.
By then, the damage had already settled where no document could reach. Her parents aged in small, visible ways. Her father's shoulders curved more. Her mother startled at raised voices on television. They thanked her often, too often, as if afraid gratitude was now a debt. She told them to stop.
One evening, months later, she stood alone on the balcony. The sea was calm, indifferent as ever. Lights flickered along the coast. Somewhere nearby, another family was probably arguing over dinner. Another silence was being chosen instead of a harder truth. She thought about the moment she had opened the door and how everything had frozen, how that single step inside had ended one version of their family forever. She did not regret protecting her parents, but she mourned the sister she would never speak to the same way again. The house remained. The view remained. The anniversary was celebrated quietly, without speeches or photographs. Just three people sitting together, watching the water move in and out, knowing exactly what it had cost to keep that place. Some betrayals don't end with shouting. They end with distance that never fully closes. Like and subscribe.